So, I recently received a request to talk about being single in your early 20s. The message read, "Please write about coping with having never been in a relationship in your early 20s and what you should do. Is there no hope?" And I thought I could be an excellent resource on this because I didn't date at all until my late 20s. And when I say I didn't date, I mean I didn't do anything until I was 26. I had no idea what a relationship was like. I'd never slept with someone before. I'd never gone on a date. I never held hands with anyone. Nothing. Well, let me give you some background to that. I was raised in a non-religious household where dating was not an option and was actively discouraged. From a young age, I was told that girls who date would abandon their families and neglect their parents, fail their exams, become pregnant, have no future or career, and lose the chance of any possibility of success. Additionally, from the age of 6 upwards, I was told horror stories about statistics about intimate partner violence and stories about how dangerous men were, etc., which would not only demonize all men to the young little girl that I was, but also terrified me from ever talking to any of them. Now, my story is not unique. Many people from strict households tend to only get the opportunity to explore dating once they leave home, either for work or higher education. Sadly, my eating disorder and subsequent hospitalisation the moment I left home kind of hindered my chances of even making friends, let alone finding someone who would find me attractive enough to talk to, let alone date. So whilst it may feel like in your early 20s that everyone around you is falling in love and you'll never find anyone, that's not the case. I can say, as someone who has never even come close to falling in love until my 30s, that hope is not lost and you will find someone if you want to. But when that happens will vary. I know many people who got married in their early 20s, but then divorced by their late 20s and then chose to remain single until their late 30s. I know multiple people who have chosen never to date because they have no interest in it, and I know people who have been together since school or university. Believe it or not, there are many people who don't date in their 20s at all, although your social circle and social media may not reflect that. I can speak personally that I have 5 friends in my life, all of whom are in their 30s, who have chosen never to date for multiple reasons, and all of those reasons are personal, private, and valid. But I should say that these people are some of the most gorgeous, awesome people I have ever met, and if they were to put themselves on the dating market, they'd be snapped up and fought over, guaranteed. But people choose not to date in their 20s for multiple reasons, which include prioritising work, creative projects, solo travel, or education, exploring their sexuality or their gender identity, prioritising their personal growth, freedom and friendships, or simply because they just don't have an interest in dating. Now, in my 20s, I fell under 2 categories. I obviously prioritised my education and academic pursuits, but I also honestly had no interest in dating. I didn't fancy anyone, to the point that I kind of questioned if I were aromantic or asexual because I truly was not interested. However, it's also important to consider that my 20s were a bit of a rough period. I was coming to terms with the extent of the abuse that I was subjected to growing up, and then dealing with the various mental health issues of the fallout of said abuse, and then struggling to pay my bills on minimum wage retail jobs, and getting through my undergraduate and master's degrees whilst living alone. So, needless to say, dating was the last thing on my mind. And I only started to date at the age of 26 due to social pressure to not end up alone. I remember distinctively not feeling ready or even wanting to date at the time, but I was so embarrassed and ashamed of being a 26-year-old virgin who had never even talked to a boy romantically before. And looking back on it now, in my early 30s, I know I shouldn't have felt any shame or embarrassment, because no one cared except for me, and no one knew my circumstances except for my immediate family. But the pressure to be normal and have a relationship like everyone else resulted in me saying yes to the first opportunity to be in a relationship, even though I knew it wasn't right for me or the other person. When I was reading this message, I just found it so charming how we have such huge expectations of ourselves in our early 20s. It's fascinating how our brains work at that age. The idea of not dating at such a young age means our potential for love falls into the category of hopelessness. And that just shows how big the mental burden is we carry in our youth and our expectations for our life. I know, someone my age, unmarried, still living alone without a stable job and still in higher education must seem horrifying to young hopefuls out there. However, thanks to a lot of self-growth and healing, I found more value in dating in my early 30s than I ever did in my late 20s. And I certainly would not have trusted my judgment in my early 20s because that girl was a mess, I know. But as a 31-year-old who has dealt with most of her trauma, I can be such a better partner now than I ever could have been in my 20s, therefore resulting in better relationships. And it wasn't until my 30s that I even became open to giving and receiving love. So, if you are in your early 20s and never dated, here is my advice on being single, potentially all of your 20s or not, as a late bloomer. 1. You will meet so many people over the next decade. Stop underestimating yourself. The pool of people that you are around in your early 20s is very different from those you'll meet in your late 20s and your 30s. No one I dated in my 30s was in my life in my 20s. They would never have been. Our lives would never have crossed before that point, and I am so grateful that I met them when I did. You have no idea where you will end up in 5 to 10 years, or even in 1 year or 2 years. You may get a job opportunity abroad, move cities, decide to go on holiday, and all these little things will lead you to meet incredible people who may or may not become romantic interests. The pool you're in now does not reflect the ocean that you're about to swim through, so don't force anything to happen now. Just allow life to carry you through and see who comes along. Number 2, you are not in your prime. Sorry to burst your bubble. Something many people believe, but rarely admit to out loud, is that they think that they need to meet the love of their life now in their early 20s because they are in their prime. I met someone once who said that she wanted to be married by the age of 25 because she, quote, didn't want to look like an old lady in her wedding photos. Chasing after love and hunkering down with someone just because you don't want fine lines in your wedding photos is not a healthy approach to love. These superficial motives for finding love of your life will not result in a happy life because that's not what love's about. Yes, when you're younger, you may look more appealing to a wider audience, and you may be even classified as more fertile, but you're going to age, and you're going to need to make sure that the person you're potentially spending years of your life with, if not your whole life with, makes you happy, and you make them happy. And that comes down to you both being mentally secure, happy within yourselves, having shared interests and passions and a love of life. And that has nothing to do with how thin and young you'll look in a wedding dress. Also, on a completely different note, young 20s, I much prefer how I look in my 30s than I ever did in my 20s, wrinkles and all, so trust me, you can bloom even further. 3. Stop defining yourself by your relationship status. I get it. We still live in a world where we have bachelors and spinsters. There's a lot of stigmatization against single people, particularly women. Now, I love a good romance story, don't get me wrong, but because I didn't grow up in a nuclear family and I wasn't exposed to happy, healthy couples, I accepted from a very young age that there was a huge chance that I would end up single for the rest of my life, and I became content with that idea. Now, don't get me wrong, it would be wonderful if I met someone and then spent the rest of my life with the love of my life, but I would also ensure that I made myself a wonderful life to live, if that never happens. I see so many people wasting their lives by putting them on hold because they're waiting for someone to complete them. Date yourself and give yourself the wonderful romantic life you want. Go to the theatre and the cinema alone. Go travelling alone. Dress up nicely every day and look special for yourself, or dine out alone. Experience life and enjoy it. Write that novel. Go to those painting or dance classes. Start that wee little business you've had an idea for, or do whatever you want in life that makes a fulfilling life for you. You can build such an incredible life alone, and that in of itself will likely attract someone to want to join in with you on it. Focus on building a life you love rather than finding the love of your life. I hope this has helped you. If you like this video and any more, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. If you have any video requests, I have my Google Doc forms down below. You can go check that out and all other links. And remember, be happy and healthy, and books save lives. So keep reading.